I am Marissa Hale, and I am 48 years old. Before this story goes any further, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I promise you, your comment does not go unseen. Someone reading or listening right now needs this story, and sharing it helps it reach them. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like it didn't belong there. Cream-colored. Thick. Formal. The kind of paper people use for weddings or memorial services, not something addressed to a woman still very much alive. I noticed it the moment I walked in from work, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor of the house I had paid for myself. The house I had rebuilt with my own hands after everything in my life collapsed once already. My name was written across the front in perfect cursive. Marissa Hale. I knew that handwriting anywhere. My sister Vivian had always written like that. Every letter precise, deliberate, beautiful in a way that felt cold. Even as children, her handwriting looked older than her age, as if she'd been practicing how to look important long before she actually was. I set my purse down slowly. Too slowly. My instincts were already screaming at me, but I ignored them the way women are taught to ignore the quiet voice that tells them something is wrong. I made coffee first. That should have been my clue. When you delay opening something, it's because some part of you already knows the truth. I stood there staring at that envelope while the coffee brewed, the hum of the machine filling the kitchen with a sound that felt too normal for the moment I was in. Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped low over the rooftops of Brookhaven Park, casting long shadows across my backyard. Everything looked peaceful. It wasn't. I finally slid my finger under the flap. The paper inside was heavier than I expected. High quality. Printed professionally. The first line stole the air from my lungs. You are invited to join us as we honor the life and legacy of Marissa Hale. I laughed. I didn't mean to. It came out sharp and breathless, the kind of laugh that breaks halfway through because your body doesn't know whether to scream or cry. I kept reading. This gathering will include reflections, memories, and a discussion regarding the distribution of Marissa's estate. The date was listed clearly. Next Saturday. The location was even clearer. Vivian Hale's residence, Crestwood Heights. My knees gave out, and I sat down at the kitchen table as if someone had pulled the chair out for me. I read it again. And again. I was 48 years old. I was healthy. I had just come back from a routine checkup that confirmed my cancer was still in remission. And my family had planned my funeral. Not because I was dying, because they were tired of waiting. My hands started to tremble, the paper rattling softly between my fingers. The sound felt disrespectful somehow, like even the invitation itself was mocking me. I had survived ovarian cancer 4 years earlier. Survived surgeries, months of chemotherapy, the kind of pain that humbles you in ways you don't talk about in polite company. I had lost my hair, my strength, my appetite, and some days my will to keep fighting. But I did. I fought. For myself. For my daughter Elise. For the life I had built after my husband Nathan died in a highway construction accident 11 years earlier. Nathan had been crushed beneath steel beams when a scaffold collapsed. One phone call. One moment. One knock on the door that divided my life into before and after. I raised Elise alone after that. Paid off debts. Started a property management business from scratch. Learned how to negotiate contracts while grieving. How to attend parent-teacher conferences with eyes still swollen from crying the night before. Everything I had I earned. And now my family was rehearsing my death like it was a dinner party. I reached for my phone and called the one person who had never treated me like a walking balance sheet. Tanya. She answered on the second ring. What's wrong? She asked immediately. They sent me an invitation, I said, my voice shaking. To my funeral. There was a pause. Marissa. I'm not joking. I heard her inhale sharply. Explain. Slowly. I read the invitation out loud to her, every word tasting bitter on my tongue. By the time I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line, thick, furious silence. They planned your funeral, Tanya said finally. While you're alive. Yes. To discuss your money. Yes. And they expected you to show up. There was something almost impressive about the audacity of it. They even included an RSVP, I whispered. Oh, hell no, Tanya snapped. I'm coming over. She arrived less than an hour later with a bottle of wine and the kind of expression that meant she was already planning revenge on my behalf. We sat at my kitchen table, the invitation between us like evidence at a crime scene. Who's involved? She asked. Vivian. My brother Caleb. And, I hesitated. Elise. Tanya's jaw tightened. Elise. She knew, I said quietly. She had to. That night, memories surfaced that I had ignored for too long. The way Vivian started calling more often after my diagnosis. The way she asked questions that didn't quite sound like concern. The way Elise grew distant, her phone calls shorter, her visits less frequent. I had blamed adulthood. Work. Stress. I was wrong. The next morning, while the house was quiet, I went into Elise's old bedroom. She had moved out years ago, but she still kept things there, old clothes, boxes, memories she wasn't ready to let go of. I wasn't snooping. I was searching for the truth. Behind winter coats and a garment bag, I found a folder. Inside were copies of my personal documents. Not one or two. Dozens. Property records. Investment summaries. Life insurance policies. Business valuations. And handwritten notes. Her handwriting. Numbers circled. Totals calculated. At the bottom of one page, written neatly in blue ink. Estimated total estate, $2.1 million. Below that, split 3 ways equals approximate $700,000 each. 3 ways. I slid down onto the floor, my back against the bed, the folder heavy in my lap. This wasn't curiosity. This was planning. That afternoon, Elise texted me. Can't wait for Saturday, Mom. Aunt Vivian says she's cooking your favorite lemon chicken yellow heart. I stared at the message for a long time. My daughter wasn't checking on me. She was counting me. That Monday morning, I walked into Hawthorne Legal Group. Attorney Daniel Cross listened without interrupting as I told him everything, from the invitation to the folder in Elise's closet. When I finished, he leaned back and said calmly, "We can change everything." I nodded. "I want to." Over the next 3 days, we rewrote my entire estate. Every dollar, every asset, every clause. And when we were done, Daniel slid the papers toward me. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once this is revealed, relationships will change." I thought about the invitation. I'm sure. Saturday was coming, and I was absolutely attending my funeral. I woke up Saturday morning with a knot in my stomach, so tight it felt like my body was trying to fold in on itself. For a moment, lying there staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, I considered not going. I imagined staying home, letting them play pretend with my death, letting them divide my life like a pie while congratulating themselves for being prepared. But then I remembered the handwriting in Elise's notebook. The numbers. The calculation that reduced me to a balance sheet. And I knew I had to go. Not for revenge. Not for drama. But because silence would be permission. Tanya arrived at my house just after 9, carrying a garment bag and an expression that said she had already mentally chosen violence. Verbal violence, but still. "If you're going to attend your own funeral," she said, stepping inside, "you're not doing it dressed like someone waiting to be buried." She unzipped the bag and revealed a deep emerald dress, elegant, tailored, powerful. Not morning black. Not soft pastels. The kind of dress you wear when you want to be seen and remembered. "I look alive," I said quietly. "That's the point," Tanya replied. I showered slowly, letting the warm water steady my nerves. As I dressed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked older than I did before cancer, but stronger too. Survivor lines etched into my face. Gray threading through my hair that I no longer bothered to hide. This was a woman who had lived. And I wasn't done yet. The drive to Crestwood Heights felt unreal. Tanya talked to fill the silence, but my mind replayed memories instead. Vivian teaching me how to braid my hair when we were kids. Caleb begging me to cover rent one last time. Elise falling asleep on my shoulder when she was small, trusting me with everything she had. When we pulled up to Vivian's house, my chest tightened. Cars lined the street. Too many. People had come. Tanya parked, turned to me, and squeezed my hand. "You ready?" "No," I said. "But let's do it anyway." The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Inside, Vivian had transformed her living room into something between a memorial service and a museum exhibit. Poster boards lined the walls. Photos of my life displayed in neat chronological order. Childhood pictures. My wedding to Nathan. Elise as a baby. My cancer treatments. A professionally printed obituary sat framed on a table. Marissa Hale, devoted mother, sister, and businesswoman. The space where my death date should be was blank. I stood frozen in the doorway. People milled around holding drinks, murmuring softly. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Church friends of Vivian's. Caleb's co-workers. And there they were. Vivian. Caleb. Elise. All dressed in black. The room went silent the moment they saw me. 30 heads turned. Someone gasped. A glass shattered as Elise dropped it, champagne splashing across Vivian's cream carpet. "Well," I said, stepping inside, my heels clicking loudly against the floor. "This is awkward." Vivian recovered first. She always did. "Marissa!" she exclaimed, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You came." "I didn't want to miss my own funeral," I replied calmly. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Caleb stepped forward. "Sis, you're taking this the wrong way. This was just a celebration. Planning. Being prepared." "Prepared for what?" I asked. "My death." Elise stood frozen near the kitchen, her face pale. I walked past them toward the dining table. My belongings were laid out like prizes. My mother's china set, tagged with Vivian's name. My father's watches, labeled for Caleb. My jewelry, assigned to Elise. Documents from my business neatly stacked at the center. I picked up the china gravy boat, turning it over in my hands. "When did I give you permission to take things from my house?" I asked. Vivian's smile tightened. "Elise has a key. She helped gather items for the display." I turned slowly. "Elise," I said gently. "Come here." She walked toward me like a child being called into trouble. "Mom, I can explain." "Can you?" I asked, pulling the folder from my bag. "Can you explain these?" I held up the photocopies. Gasps echoed through the room. Property values. Account totals. Her handwriting. "Why were you going through my private documents?" I asked quietly. "Why were you calculating my estate?" Elise's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. No words came. "And maybe you can explain this," I continued, pulling out printed screenshots. "The messages where you discussed how long I might have left." Vivian stepped forward. "That's out of context." I read aloud. "Statistically, she's got maybe 10 years. 5 if it comes back. We should make sure everything's sorted." The room erupted. Uncle Leonard stood up. "You planned a funeral for your living sister to divide her things?" "This is insane," Caleb muttered. "No," I said loudly. "What's insane is thinking you'd get away with it." I opened the leather folder. "Since everyone is so interested in my will, I have an update." Vivian's face drained of color. "I rewrote it," I said calmly. 3 days ago." I read it aloud. "The house to a women's cancer foundation. The business sold, profits to charity. Personal belongings auctioned." Vivian screamed. Caleb shouted. Elise sobbed. And then Daniel Cross, my attorney, stepped forward. "The will is valid, notarized, and uncontestable," he said evenly. "Each of you will receive $1. Chaos exploded. Accusations. Tears. Anger. I stood there, oddly calm. I wasn't dead. But something else was. The illusion of family. When Tanya touched my arm, I nodded. We left them there, standing among my memories, my obituary, my life they no longer owned. I walked out alive. And I didn't look back. When I walked out of Vivian's house that afternoon, the air felt different. Lighter. Not because I wasn't hurting, God knows I was, but because I had finally stopped carrying something that never belonged to me in the first place. The weight of other people's expectations. The burden of being the strong one, who always forgave, always explained, always made room for behavior that should never have been tolerated. Tanya didn't say anything as we drove away. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough. Some people don't try to fix your pain. They sit with it, steady and loyal, and that's the real gift. By the time we reached my house in Brookhaven Park, my phone was already buzzing. Missed calls. Texts. Voicemails. Vivian. Caleb. Numbers I didn't recognize. I turned the phone face down on the table and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the emotional aftershock of what I'd just done. I had detonated my family, and I didn't regret it. That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed moments from the funeral over and over. Elise's face when the will was revealed, Vivian's scream, Caleb's fury. For the first time since Nathan died, I cried myself to sleep not because of grief alone, but because of loss layered with betrayal. The next morning, the messages intensified. Vivian left a voicemail sobbing. "Marissa, please. We didn't mean it like that. You misunderstood everything. We were just trying to protect the family." Caleb's text came an hour later. "You've gone too far. You're punishing everyone over a misunderstanding." Elise didn't contact me at all. That silence hurt more than anything else. 3 days later, Daniel Cross called. "They've contacted lawyers," he said calmly. "Vivian especially. They're looking for loopholes. Will they find any? I asked. No, he replied. Your will is airtight. They can make noise, but that's all it'll be. I thanked him and hung up, feeling both relieved and exhausted. Tanya practically moved in that week. She screened my calls, cooked meals, and made sure I didn't spiral into isolation. At night, when the house grew quiet, the grief crept in. I wasn't mourning money. I was mourning the family I thought I had. A week later, Uncle Leonard came by unannounced. He stood awkwardly on my porch holding a casserole dish like an offering. I didn't know, he said once we sat at the table. None of us knew how bad it was. They knew, I said softly. They just didn't care. Leonard nodded slowly. Your father would have been proud of you. He always said you had backbone. I didn't feel strong. I felt hollow. Strength doesn't always feel good, he said gently. Sometimes it just feels lonely. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Vivian stopped calling once her lawyer confirmed there was nothing to contest. Caleb sent one last angry message before going silent. Elise finally wrote. Not a text. A letter. It arrived in the mail, handwritten. The envelope creased like it had been folded and unfolded a dozen times. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time before opening it. Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. She wrote about guilt, about manipulation, about how easy it was to be influenced by Vivian when fear and greed were disguised as planning. She admitted she had treated me like an obstacle instead of a mother. I turned you into numbers because I was scared of losing everything, she wrote. And in doing that, I lost you. The letter was 3 pages long. By the end, my hands were shaking again, but this time for a different reason. This wasn't an apology written to regain money. It was an apology written because she finally understood what she'd broken. I folded the letter and placed it in my purse. I wasn't ready to respond yet. Life moved forward whether I was ready or not. 3 months later, my old house looked nothing like it used to. The Women's Cancer Recovery Foundation had transformed it into a community support center. The living room where Elise once played now hosted group therapy sessions. My old bedroom had become an office for counselors. The dining room was filled with pamphlets, coffee, and quiet conversations between survivors who understood pain without needing explanations. I volunteered twice a week. It felt right, like my life had finally grown beyond the narrow confines my family tried to trap it in. One afternoon after volunteering, Tanya handed me another envelope. It came for you here, she said. It was from Elise. Another letter. This one was shorter. She told me she'd started therapy, that she had moved out of Vivian's house into a small apartment downtown, that she'd begun volunteering at a non-profit supporting families dealing with grief. I know the will stays as it is, she wrote. And it should. I'm not asking for anything. I just want the chance to become someone worthy of being your daughter again. I stared at the words for a long time. 3 weeks later, I agreed to meet her. Neutral ground. A small cafe near the river. She looked thinner, older, calmer. When she hugged me, she cried. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about the will. We talked about therapy, about my volunteering, about life. When we parted, she thanked me for meeting her. I'm still angry, I told her honestly. I know, she replied. I'll earn my way back, or I won't. Either way, I'll respect you. That was new. Trust rebuilt slowly after that. Carefully. No promises. No assumptions. I never changed the will. The charities deserved it. But I did open a small savings account in Elise's name. Not as inheritance, but as support. On my terms. With boundaries. Vivian and Caleb remain strangers. Some bridges don't deserve rebuilding. Today, my life is quieter. Smaller in some ways. Bigger in others. I'm surrounded by people who value me while I'm alive. Not for what I'll leave behind, but for who I am. And when my real funeral happens, decades from now, it won't be a rehearsal for greed. It'll be a reflection of love earned. And if this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Your support keeps stories like this alive, and I promise, your comment does not go unseen.